You are very welcome back to World Have Your Say. And we're very happy to have with us today Ambassador Vitaly Churkin, who's Russia's ambassador to the United Nations. Thank you so much for spending the rest of the hour with us. So many people have got in touch today and want to ask some of the questions. I see one of the gentlemen that is right here with us, Viktor Mishenko, who's an English teacher in Donetsk. You're very welcome to the program, Viktor.
Thank you very much. Before he does ask his question, may I make a quick comment? Actually, it's a question mark. You have been discussing Thailand, and I've been wondering, you know, in the United Nations, we like to talk a lot about preventive diplomacy. Actually, this is one of the favorite subjects of the UK delegation to the Security Council. But in this case, for some reason, the United Nations have not shown much interest over the months of the crisis in Thailand and the situation in that country. And the United Kingdom or the United States, who have close relations with Thailand, after all, never brought the situation to the attention of the Security Council, even though quite often they bring to the attention of the Security Council minuscule details of the situations in various countries.
What would you like to see them do in this situation?
I'm just wondering. It's just a question mark, which I don't know. I don't know enough about the situation in Thailand, but I'm wondering why preventive diplomacy was not tried in the case of that country. In many other cases, we actually talked on the initiative of the United Kingdom about some constitutional problems in the Maldives. Thailand is a much more important country, and somehow it was ignored from the attention of the United Nations. And I am just wondering why that has happened. Because,
I haven't got an answer for you on this particular program, but I will ask it definitely with the next UK or US politician that I am interviewing. Again, thank you very much for speaking to us. Let's meet Viktor, who's in Donetsk. You're very welcome to the program, Viktor, and I believe you have a question for the ambassador.
Yes, I do have a question. I live in a place where predominantly population supports Russia, and I'm wondering what our leaders should do in order for our region, the Donetsk region, to become part of Russia, like Crimea became a part of Russia a few months ago.
Ambassador, would you like to respond?
Well, first of all, I think the first step is to try to normalize the situation. And, you know, we are not, I don't think Donetsk becoming a part of Russia is the thing which we need to discuss now. The thing we need to discuss now is for the military operation which the Kiev authorities started there is to stop. And then for the Donetsk region and the Lugansk region to enter into dialogue with Kiev. Unfortunately, so far, the Kiev authorities have not been willing to enter into this dialogue. And this completely tragic situation has been created. So, you know, after the referenda in Donetsk and Lugansk regions, we made a statement where we encouraged them to work out their problems, their concerns with Kiev, and this is where we stand.
Viktor, would you like to respond?
Okay, but do you think, are there any prospects of our regions becoming parts of Russia? Maybe there are possibilities of this happening in the near future.
Ambassador?
You know, I cannot go into this kind of a theoretical discussion. I think that there are certain challenges, certain steps which need to be taken in the immediate future. First of all, to stop violence, and secondly, to have a dialogue between Kiev and those two regions of Ukraine, and also, of course, some other regions of Ukraine which want their future to be clarified.
There's a comment I'd like to bring to you, and thank you, Viktor, for your comment. Adelaide in Lagos, Nigeria, and he got in touch on Facebook, you can too, and he says Russia should not only annex Crimea, but the whole of Ukraine. I like Putin as long as he does anything that angers the West. Ambassador, when you hear that comment, what do you think?
Well, I hope we're going to have a serious conversation.
And, I mean, what he's talking about there, what's behind Adelaide's comment, is that he feels that Russia should be pushing back against the West. Is that part of what has happened over the past few months?
Well, if this is his feeling, that's fine. I haven't met serious people in Russia who are thinking along these lines.
So you don't think that there's been hostility between the West and the East?
Well, I think that unfortunately there's been some aggravation of the situation over Ukraine, and we have some problems on other areas, some differences of views on some international problems. And the situation today is far from perfect, but I do feel that things can turn around and we can get back to normalcy in our relations with the West.
Another comment coming in this time from Juma, and he asks from Nigeria on WhatsApp, is Russia willing to work with the Ukrainian government? Interesting question. The election's coming up on Sunday.
You know, we are not only willing, we have been working with them, even though we don't recognize the legitimacy of that government, but we have been trying to resolve practical problems with them. For instance, we have been trying to clarify the situation with their purchases of our natural gas, for which they have not been paying. So we are in contact with them, and we will continue to be in the future.
You mentioned that you don't consider them a legitimate government. Can you work with a government that you don't consider legitimate?
Well, you can, of course. If there are things which need to be dealt with, then you deal with those things. You don't do certain things which might be politically symbolic, but you deal with people on the working level, and there have been meetings with our Minister of Energy and their Minister of Energy, and there have been various contacts at different levels. You know, you try to do what is important for your country and for your neighboring country, which is Ukraine in the case of Russia.
It's Friday evening in Ukraine. The elections are taking place this weekend, and Nana in Kiev got in touch on Facebook and said, what are your expectations ahead of the Ukrainian elections?
Well, first of all, I would like to expect that they will stop this military campaign in the East, because if they want this election to be viewed as a legitimate election, I think this should be in their own interest in the first place. Then my hope would be that they will clarify the situation on the Constitution, because currently they have a bizarre situation when they have a presidential election when nobody knows what the powers of the president are going to be. And unfortunately, I think one can foresee that after the election there is going to be an enormous infighting among the Ukrainian political elite about the constitutional reform, the powers of the next president, because usually politicians, when elected presidents, are reluctant to give up their powers to anybody, including their own parliament. So unfortunately, it may well be that even after that election, even if the president sort of is elected and recognized by everybody, or by large part of the population of Ukraine, by large part of the international community, it does not necessarily mean that trouble will end. And the cause of that is that in Kiev they decided to reverse the process, to put the cart in front of the horse. They were supposed, in accordance with the February 21 agreement, which Yanukovych and opposition leaders signed, and which was also co-signed by 3 foreign ministers of the European Union, to do a constitutional reform first, and then when things will become clear about the relationship between Kiev and the regions, about the relationship between the president and the parliament, then they could have presidential elections and parliamentary elections. But they chose to reverse the process and chose to only talk about their constitutional reform without really consulting much with anybody, including the regions. I mean, it's not yet clear
but indeed these
what
elections...
kind of constitution they are going to propose even after the presidential election. So, unfortunately, I'm not a great expert on Ukraine, but from things which I see and I've been observing over the past few months, unfortunately, things are going to continue to be chaotic. But I do hope that if a new president is elected, he will have the courage to enter into real dialogue with the regions and with various political factions, and to get rid of this practice of intimidation.
It does not
so
sound like you are very positive. I want to just run a statement.
I would like to be more positive. I would like to be more positive, but this is my assessment of the situation. Of course, I would like to be more positive, but I'm speaking, frankly to you.
And thank you for speaking frankly to us. I don't know whether you heard this. Just before we went on air, Ukraine's ambassador to the UN said that Russia, and I quote, continues to destabilize the east of Ukraine, criticizing your plans to hold military exercises at the time of elections. What would you respond to that?
I have no idea what kind of military exercises he is talking about. I mean, we had a period of exercises in the west of our country, on our territory, not far from the territory of Ukraine. Those exercises were concluded, and the troops which were involved in those exercises are moving back to their barracks. So I don't know what my colleague from Ukraine has in mind.
So no, what would I say, comment in that sense. You don't agree in any way that Russia is continuing to destabilize the east of Ukraine?
No, we don't. I mean, they keep trying to blame Moscow for everything, but they are the ones who launched this military operation in the east of the country. So they should blame themselves for the consequences of that. And they failed to, for 2 months, the situation after the coup in February 22, after the ouster of President Yanukovych, there was not much trouble in eastern parts of the country, but people were expecting some kind of dialogue with Kyiv. They failed to establish any kind of dialogue, and so people became extremely concerned about their future, and started protesting, started organizing referenda on their status. So it's entirely Kyiv's fault that they were not able to put their act together. I hope after the presidential election, if it's successful, they will be able to do that.
Well, Ambassador, let's go to Lviv, to Yulia Nanyak, and who also has a question for Ambassador Churkin.
Good evening, Mr. Churkin. My question is, what is the aim of Russia supporting terrorists in the eastern regions of Ukraine? What advantage do you get from that?
Well, first of all, you should stop calling your own people terrorists. If you want Ukraine to be a united country, you should be more respectful to people living in other regions of the country. In Donetsk, let me give you one example. In Donetsk and Lugansk, they conducted this referenda on their status on the 11th of May. People may have different legal views about the legitimacy of that referendum, but that was clear that people were expressing their own views about their future, and they were opting for independence, thousands of them, and it's a territory of 7 million people. But from the outset, instead of organizing dialogue with those people, or even trying to set up some kind of dialogue with those people, what Kyiv was doing, the current authorities, they were appointing their own governors to those regions, some of them notorious corrupt oligarchs, and they were talking to those oligarchs without even trying to talk to others. The response, your question is quite indicative of the mood, I think, of some in Ukraine, unfortunately. Instead of being serious about this dialogue and being respectful towards your own people, they started branding them bandits, terrorists. We had the same thing here in the Security Council. This is, I think, exactly the root cause of many of the troubles. People don't like to be called terrorists when the only thing they want to see is to have the right to elect their governors, to have the right to speak the language they choose. In the case of East Ukraine, it's the Russian language. To have some kind of a budgetary freedoms within financial process which exists in each country.
You've brought up a lot of
but
points
Kyiv,
there,
for the current
Ambassador,
authorities, were not able to engage in any kind of dialogue.
I think Yulia would like also to respond.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
okay.
Yulia.
Yes. First of all, those cravings that you've listed, these are the cravings of all citizens of Ukraine. But how would you call people who just hijack people, torture them, put a bag with sand on their backs, and cut their belly when they are still alive and throwing them to the river? And there were quite a few of things like that.
Well, you know, all those things you are describing are horrible, and certainly whoever would have been doing those things would be doing something very wrong. But to me, the things you have mentioned are some which many, those who care to have objective information, they saw happening when the current authorities in Kyiv were coming to power in Kyiv, when they were burning police officers in the Maidan, when their snipers were shooting at protesters and police officers in order to create the hysterical atmosphere for a military coup, for a forcible coup in Kyiv. And to me, you are describing the actions of those who torched people in this trade union house in Odessa on the 2nd of May. So yes, those acts do remind me very much as terrorist activity, which is aimed in the first instance of Maidan in Kyiv, of taking over power by force, and in the second instance of terrorizing the population. This is what we saw in Odessa. This is something which could have been seen and is being seen in some other parts of the eastern parts of Ukraine, where authorities are trying to terrorize the population.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that response.
Their views.
And it is indeed something that I have to say. Thank you, Yulia, as well, for your comment. The language that comes out of Ukraine and the way that people speak to various people about the same issue, but seems to be very different opinions. Let's watch a video that came in from Donetsk in Ukraine.
Good evening, Mr. Churkin. My name is Alexei. I am a PhD in international economy in Donetsk. My question is, Ukraine economy do need international assistance, but why Russia only sent military assistance, mercenaries or paramilitaries like Cossacks to Ukraine, but not an economic help that was provided for the previous regime?
So money, not military, is what he needs. So we just have a minute, Ambassador.
For a student, I'm sorry, but for a student of economy, you could be doing much better. We offered the $15 billion grant to you in December. We have been supplying you natural gas for which you have not been paying. So we've been going out of our way to help Ukraine in whatever economic, and we were offering our economic cooperation. So our helping hand has always been there.
Thank you, Ambassador. And that, I have to say, Alex, I'm afraid he doesn't agree with your point that you brought up. But thank you very much for sending your video in to World Have Your Say. You can indeed get in touch. Facebook.com/World Have Your Say is a good place to start. More with the Ambassador after this break.
Let me say something. Hello, it must already feel like Moscow's at the height of summer, with temperatures getting close to 30 Celsius day after day after day, with this persistent area of high pressure. All the weather action is further west in Europe, an area of low pressure spinning bands of thundery rain around it through France, the United Kingdom, Germany, and bearing down on Poland as well as we go into Saturday morning. So this is the picture as Saturday begins. 9 degrees in Madrid. There's not a lot of warmth in Iberia at the moment. The storms marching through Italy and into the Balkans as well. Not widespread rain, but there will be showers and thunderstorms around as recovery efforts continue after the recent severe flooding, particularly in Bosnia and Serbia. Here it is in more detail then for Saturday. Some wet weather at times to the eastern side of Spain. To the west, it's looking mainly dry, and into Portugal. More showers and storms popping up, though, in France. Pretty windy with these as well. Paris at 17 degrees. And more very wet weather with the risk of heavy thunderstorms moving through the United Kingdom. Some warmth to be found in Scandinavia, particularly as you head further east as well into the Baltic states, with, again, temperatures near 30 in the hot spots. Some warmth, though, for Sunday and Monday in Rome with sunny spells. Thunderstorms come back to Paris on Monday. The French Open tennis is by then well underway. Africa to the north and south is mainly dry. Scattered showers and storms through equatorial parts. And that's it from me. There's more weather available online. I'll see you again soon.
My World Cup dream it is to compete with honor. We crossed the hell during the qualification period. Now it is the heaven for us. It is time to enjoy. Our goal it is to try to reach the second stage. Iran was playing with the World Cup 3 times. And they never qualified for the second round. Without a very, very special World Cup preparation, Iran doesn't have any chance to reach that dream. With a very specific, high-quality preparation, it is possible to raise the level of our team. It is the only way that we can bring joy, honor, and prestige to the Iranian fans.
To stay up to speed with the fast-moving world of science, download the new BBC Horizons app. You can find out more about the research shaping the latest trends, enjoy reports from all 4 series of Horizons, and discover how different technologies are being applied across the globe.
Bomb attacks raiding villages and abducting children.
We want our girls back now.
Let's get. We're going to do everything we can to assist them.
As the story unfolds, we'll bring you the latest updates.
This is a whole generation.
Hello, I'm Nuala McGovern. Welcome back to World Have Your Say. Well, today we have Russia's ambassador to the United Nations, Mr. Vitaly Churkin, and he's taking questions. You can tweet them now using the hashtag WHYS.
Talking about it. Top priority. Like, clearly. People are going to want to know.
Let's just say something.
Thank you to all of you who've got in touch to ask questions of Russia's ambassador to the United Nations. Mr. Vitaly Churkin is with us for the rest of the hour. And I want to play a video. Now, this is a question from Elena, who's a student in London. Let's take a listen, a watch.
Good afternoon, Mr. Churkin. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of London. My question is about the latest diplomatic row between the UK and Russia. What do you think as a diplomat about Prince Charles's private conversation about comparison between Putin and Hitler? And do you think that asking for a clarification from the FCO is an adequate reaction? Because, as we all know, Mr. Putin, in his recent speech, has used words like national traitors. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Elena, for sending that in.
I think,
and we are speaking to the ambassador, Vitaly Churkin, who is Russia's ambassador to the UN. And ambassador, so we had Elena there saying, what did you think about Prince Charles' private conversation? Any thoughts on that?
You know, I don't even know if he made those comments, and I think some clarification from London would be appropriate, but you know, such comments are completely unacceptable.
There was, with it, some of the language has brought up a debate, in particular about this comparison with Mr. Putin, that Mr. Putin previously used language including national traitors and national socialism that Elena was mentioning there as an ideology. But with the comments, you don't want to comment on them at all?
First of all, yeah. No, but first of all, I don't recall President Putin use those terms. But yes, as we describe the situation in Ukraine, we talk about national radicals. We know that there are people there who, you know, carry the portraits of Nazi collaborators. They inspire them ideologically, so we describe them accordingly. But I don't see any connection between that and the comments which were allegedly made about President Putin.
And what it was with those particular comments, it was with a speech given on March 18th by President Putin, talking about the annexation of Crimea, where some of the language that was used, people were upset over, said it had some comparison.
Well, listen, I don't have this text. I don't have this text. Well, listen, I don't have this text with me. Things have to be taken in the context, so I don't think it's a useful conversation. I can't answer this question without seeing the text.
Okay, well, thank you for that point. Let's meet Milanka Podolyak, who's a student and activist in Lviv. Let's return to Lviv. You're very welcome to the program, Milanka. What would you like to ask?
My question is, when we're talking about Russia invading Ukraine, there are always solid proofs. There are photos, there are videos, footage, documents, etc. Russia, on the other hand, while blaming America for intervening into our internal affairs, has nothing. How do you explain that?
Ambassador.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have. I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear things well. Well, first, Russia invading Ukraine. Russia has not invaded Ukraine.
I can repeat, Ambassador, for you.
Yeah, please do.
Basically, Malanka is saying that there is proof of Russian interference into matters in Ukraine, but she feels there is no proof of American interference. And how do you explain that? She talks about videos, basically eyewitness accounts, etc.
Well, you know, every time a senior American official visited Kiev recently, first director of CIA, then Vice President Biden, the authorities in Kiev made a decision to further escalate the conflict. Speaking about visuals, Vice President Biden essentially presided over a government meeting in Kiev when he was there. And before that, of course, before the coup of February 22, there was heavy American interference. There were very illustrative videos of senior American officials, marching in the Maidan, American senators coming and invited to put pressure on President Yanukovych. The Americans discussing the composition of the Ukrainian government with each other, American officials. So, I mean, it's not even a matter of debate. The influence of the United States and the current Kiev authorities is overwhelming. There is no, I mean, let me tell you, I'm sitting here in the United Nations. There are very few people from the members of the United Nations who would doubt that.
And indeed, we can see those flags waving behind you. Now, I see Malanka's line isn't fantastic, so I'm sorry about the Malanka, but I can see that you've been nodding your head in disagreement, should I say, Ambassador, as indeed you were answering that question. But thank you.
No, if she's nodding, this is agreement. If she's nodding, this is agreement.
It's disagreement,
no, if she's nodding,
I'm
this
afraid.
Is agreement. If she were shaking her head, that would be disagreement.
I can see Malanka right there with a big smile, but nodding in disagreement. But thank you indeed for getting in touch. We've lots more, Ambassador. Many people have been getting in touch throughout the day. We have a video from Emma. Now, she's Syrian, but living in Paris, France.
Mr. Churkin, how do you explain Russia's contradictory position on the issue of presidential election in Syria and Ukraine? In Ukraine, you call the presidential election pointless without a nationwide dialogue, while in Syria, your government fully supports the fake presidential election and calls it democratic even after 3 years of systematic war crimes against the people.
Right, so that's Emma, Syrian, living in Paris.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ambassador.
You're not describing our position correctly. Well, first of all, we're not saying that presidential elections in Ukraine are pointless. President Putin did say a while ago that it was a step in the right direction. We are open-minded about the elections. We hope they are going to be conducted in a fair manner, and we're going to produce a credible person who is going to be able to unite the country, to engage in a dialogue with everybody. As to Syria, the decision to conduct presidential elections was made by Damascus, and we are just watching the process. We are not, obviously, the election there is going to be conducted in very unusual circumstances. Such things have happened in the past. I mean, for a number of years, elections have been conducted in Afghanistan in a situation of war. But the main thing is not to engage into a debate about the level of legitimacy of elections in Syria, but to keep pushing for a political settlement.
That's a really interesting comment that you make, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know there can be a tiny delay, but the fact that you feel it is not Russia's business in any way to decide whether the Syrian elections are legitimate.
You know, our primary concern and our primary effort is to make sure there can be a political settlement in Syria. So when people say, well, after this presidential elections in Syria, we cannot have a political dialogue, we cannot have a political process, as I think they are doing disservice to the Syrian people. We must do everything what we can in order to have a political process and to have a prospect for an end to that crisis in Syria. And to be distracted by various things, including this presidential election, I think is fundamentally wrong.
I want you to meet Musab AlHamadi, a Syrian journalist in Istanbul. You're very welcome to the program. What would you like to ask?
200,000 people are killed in my country by chemical weapons, by barrel bombs, and by Scud missiles. My question to Ambassador Churkin is, why you are supporting the dictator in my country and not allowing justice to take its path in the Security Council, especially like the draft resolution we had yesterday. It talked about referring all sides responsible for crimes in Syria to the ICC.
Thank you, Musab.
Well, yesterday's draft resolution and referral to ICC, you know, I think everybody should realize and do realize that currently there can be no justice process. There can be no normal legal process in ICC or anywhere else. Peace must be established before anything can be done in this regard. So we saw this draft resolution simply as a political ploy of people who were not believing, and they said that quite openly. The French ambassador, some others said quite openly that they thought there was no prospect for a political settlement, no prospect for a political process, so we are going to go ahead and put this draft of the table, which which they knew perfectly well was not going to be adopted. So we think that this is a counterproductive policy, and we need to push for a political settlement. And if people had not been focusing on regime change in Syria, you know, talking all the time about the need to oust President Assad, and would have a broader and more profound look at the situation of Syria and the need to resolve the crisis there, then I think that the crisis would have been resolved some time ago.
It is just Russia and China that indeed vetoed it. The 13 other Security Council members were happy to approve it. I did see that you said you were going to vote in a boringly predictable way, and you did indeed go ahead to do that. But let's speak now with Dr Holliday, writer and filmmaker in Leicester in the UK. Thank you very much. I know you've been waiting a little while to ask your question. Please go ahead.
I do realize that Mr. Churkin himself vetoed the bill at the UN yesterday because he said he's very interested in seeking political solution in Syria. And I want to ask him, how can that be achieved given the very complex situation in Syria at the moment?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we all need to be working in the same direction. And so far, this is not the case. Again, referring to some statements which were made yesterday by our Western colleagues, they did not seem to believe that the process of negotiation should continue. In fact, we know that after just 2 rounds of talks in Geneva, they were discouraging the Secretary General of the United Nations and his special representative from continuing those talks, which we think is a fundamental mistake. But also, I personally believe that there is a certain prospect now, even now, under the current tragic circumstances, to move things forward. And Lakhdar Brahimi, the Secretary General's special representative, who is now leaving his job, he said some very interesting things where he was in the Security Council a few days ago. And there are some openings. For instance, Iran has made an interesting proposal for the settlement which should be explored. There may have been indications that Saudi Arabia is finally prepared to talk to Iran and to engage, because so far they have even refused to talk to Lakhdar Brahimi, the UN Special Representative. And we know that some Gulf countries have been supplying weapons to various groups, including terrorist groups. So there have been a number of actors who have been extremely counterproductive and destructive in their attitude to the situation in Syria, often playing out their own geopolitical agenda to the detriment of the Syrian people.
I think Dr. Holliday wants to come back. Just one moment. Go ahead.
You talk about the actors.
Well, if you let me finish the question, I would let her come back.
Finish your point, Ambassador. I'm sorry. There's a number of points that you brought up, so I know, Doctor.
No, please. I've already forgot my point. I already forgot my point.
Well, let's
if you
go ahead,
interrupt
Doctor.
me,
Let's get a response.
We'll
continue the conversation.
And it will. Okay.
Okay, just one moment. Go ahead, Doctor. I know there was one point you wanted to pick up on there.
I mean, yes. I mean, he mentioned the actors that are contributing to the escalation of conflict in Syria, and I do believe that also Russia was a major actor in the conflict because of the arms race, which is going also to Syria. I mean, I wonder if Russia will support arms embargo, not only on the two conflicting parties. I mean, if we really force arms embargo on the government side and on the rebel side.
And I'm sorry to hurry people along. I just know we have limited time. So, Ambassador, what about an arms embargo?
Okay, we said Okay, we said a long time ago, President Putin said to President Hollande first, a couple of years ago, that we would be prepared to consider an arms embargo on Syria if somebody explains to us how it can be enforced for arms supplies to the opposition groups, including terrorists. Because we have our experience in Libya, where an arms embargo was imposed, but people simply disregarded the arms embargo in supplying weapons to opposition groups. I mean, the figure which I heard in the US Congress during some debate, that was Qatar alone brought in 20,000 tons of weapons with the connivance of the United States, with the support of the United States to Libya. So after this experience, we are not prepared to consider that unless we know for sure that there's going to be a way to cut off arms supplies to various opposition groups, including terrorist groups.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, Dr Holliday, a writer and filmmaker, speaking to us today from Leicester. It's coming up to almost midday in New York, where the Ambassador is joining us from, but we have another 15 minutes with him. More to come on World Have Your Say.
No, I actually talking about it. Let me say something.
Rajan Datar tries out something a little different for the travel show.
This is crazy. I shouldn't be doing this in the middle of Manila traffic. I'm going to be dancing Michael Jackson moves.
It's certainly not for the faint-hearted. But he's also exploring a much calmer side to the Philippines.
This is an incredibly lucky moment. The Travel Show, your essential guide to wherever you're heading on BBC World News.
5 dynamic CEOs.
Well, Spiker obviously means a lot to me because it's my baby.
Challenged by their staff.
They really want me to feel the pain.
To join the workforce.
He has to turn around. Turn around. Now it's right. He's not as quick as the mechanics.
And take a fresh look at their business.
I learned more from that than I would from reading any kind of textbook.
As they escape from the boardroom. This weekend on BBC World News.
Welcome to Talking Movies. I'm Tom Brooke.
Man from the BBC, how are you?
Yeah.
Lovely to see you.
We travel the globe, covering the world of cinema, going behind the scenes, meeting the big players. We're here on BBC World News, and our content is online too. We look at how movies entertain us and affect our lives. We're a global operation with reporters in Mumbai.
Money and marketability is a big question mark on filmmakers in India.
Africa.
This is uncharted territory for performance arts in Nigeria.
London.
The films were not shot in Hollywood, but right here in the UK.
And the US.
Can Hollywood make religious films that appeal to a broad audience?
We approach our work with a journalistic zeal.
So sly with your questions.
I'm very sly.
Follow us on BBC World News, on television, online, and in social media.
3, 2, 1.
No, I actually talking about it. Let me say something.
You are very welcome back to World Have Your Say. All hour we've been speaking to Russia's ambassador to the United Nations, Vitaly Churkin. He's been taking your questions. Let's get another few in before the end of the hour. And let's meet Colin Zennikov, who is a musician in the band called The Oligarchs. He's in Moscow, as we can see, with that beautiful backdrop behind him. You're very welcome to the programme, Colin. The ambassador is here to take your question.
Mr. Ambassador, you previously described the Russians' position on Ukraine quite clearly. Thank you for that. My question is, what is the rest of the United Nations think about it? It seems like so far Russia has only been supported, let's say, for with not the world-leading countries such as Bolivia, Syria, Nicaragua, Sudan, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Why is that?
Well, different people have different views. Let me tell you, I've had long lines of ambassadors coming up to me and congratulating me on what Russia did, particularly on the Crimea, where we prevented the bloodshed we are seeing now in eastern Ukraine, and where we heeded the will of the people of Crimea to rejoin Russia.
Okay, so do you think that there would be more supporters for Russia anytime soon?
There are plenty, let me tell you. There are plenty of supporters of Russia. We are extremely comfortable here in the United Nations with the support we get from on fundamental issues of international affairs from Africa, Arab world, Asia, whatever. So you should not underestimate the support Russia has in the United Nations on fundamental issues of international life.
Thank you very much, Colin, for your comment and for taking the time to speak to us here. Jorge got in touch on Facebook. Now, he said, after the crisis in Ukraine is sorted out, does Russia intend to have, once again, positive diplomatic relationships with the Western powers, or is Russia willing to keep moving away from the West? Now, this kind of goes full circle, Ambassador, because we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the hour. What would you respond to Jorge? Looking forward to a warmer relationship with the West?
No, of course, we would need to establish normal relations. You know, it's our mutual interest. It can be either win-win or lose-lose situation, and I think that our Western partners, being pragmatic people, would prefer to have a win-win rather than lose-lose. So I do believe that things need to get back to normalcy, and they will.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Vitaly Churkin, speaking to us today from New York. And for all of you that have got in touch with your comments, there will be the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations is going to be interviewed by Zena Badawi later here on BBC World News. That's at 1800 GMT, about the situation in his country and his reaction to Ambassador Churkin's comments on this programme. Ambassador, just before I let you go, just a final thought. As you've spoken to us all hour, I feel you're more positive about Syria than Ukraine.
Well, you know, I'd like to be positive on both issues. I mean, of course, the situation is very different, but I hope things will improve in both situations.
Okay, well, thank you very much for spending a full hour with us here.